What is poppin', Valhalla heads? It is me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoilers Show. The adventures of Richard Daniel Sanchez and Mortimer Chauncey Smith continue with episode 9 of an insane season 7 of Rick and Morty, an episode where, spoiler alert, Richard and Mortimer meet their untimely demises at the big hands of a Bigfoot, almost ending the Richard and Mortimer program as we know it, if it wasn't for the power of religion. And science. Mostly science. I, for one, am dying to talk about this episode with all of you wonderful homies. So let's just dive into this thing, shall we? The title of this newest episode is called Mort Ragnarok, which is of course a reference to Marvel Studios' Thor Ragnarok and the Valhalla-centric nature of this episode. And the episode opens with Jerry Smith setting a record for TV's most annoying family member as he annoys his dead grandparents in the afterlife after dying 8 times. This happens after Jerry is somehow convinced by Rick to become a guinea pig and die repeatedly in order for Rick to gain valuable scientific data about the nature of the afterlife. When Jerry runs into his grandmother in the sky, I notice that his grandmother looks a lot like Jerry and Jerry's father, Leonard Smith, leading me to assume that this grandmother was from his father's side. Granny Smith then informs Jerry that his constant lack of commitment to death has annoyed his grandfather enough to no longer show up to see him. But before Jerry can explain to his grandmother that his father-in-law is a mad genius, he is brought back to life in a hospital bed by Rick and Morty, a hospital bed design similar to the one found in the 2017 remake of Flatliners, a movie about a group of young people who purposely briefly end their own lives in order to gain insight and intelligence from the other side. The original Flatliners actually came out in 1990 and stars Kiefer Sutherland, Julia Roberts, and Kevin Bacon, whereas the 2017 remake stars a female presenting Elliot Page, Kiersey Clemons, Diego Luna, and Nina Dobrev. But what's interesting about the 2017 movie in particular is that it is revealed that Elliot Page's character, who initially came up with the idea to induce death in the name of science, only did so in order to see a dead family member in the afterlife again, which could potentially be what is subconsciously and secretly motivating Rick with the creation of this machine, with his hunt for infinite energy just being a sweet extra bonus. With Rick Prime being successfully wiped off his plane of existence, Rick needs to find a whole new reason for living. And while yes, Rick has been slowly getting his mojo back, in the episode since he covered himself in the blood of his mortal enemy, he still feels a massive Diane-sized hole in his life and likely wanted to confirm if she still existed out there somewhere in some capacity after Rick Prime wiped her out of existence on a multiversal scale. At any rate, this episode is a clear homage to those Flatliners movies. But as the title of the episode suggests, this episode of course seems to also be taking a lot of cues from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In particular, the MCU's interpretation of the afterlife existing as a separate plane of existence where the mind energies of dead humans aggregate together into groups according to their individual beliefs, with that mind energy being represented as yellow in the MCU, much like it does in this episode. It's why warrior believers of the Norse pantheon like Jane Foster went to the Norse afterlife of Valhalla, why Rocket was transported to an afterlife of open cages in an open sky in Guardians 3, and basically the MCU science behind the Eternals and how they're able to repeatedly die and come back to life. Because the Eternals believe in the Celestials as their religion, their yellow mind energies are sent to the World Forge as their afterlife, being stored as yellow mind energy in these weird cubbies made by the Celestials to later be reinserted into new bodies by the Celestials. But anyways, as Rick tinkers with his computer after making this discovery of a gold mine of raw consciousness energy, the Tree of Life symbol can be seen in the top right corner of his computer screen. According to the tenets of sacred geometry, the Tree of Life is a symbol associated with the connection between this earthly plane and the heavenly one, as well as the afterlife in general. Then after the intro, Rick and Morty head to the frosty hills of Norway, where Rick finds his clone and initiates a Phoenix protocol, which involves downloading his consciousness back into a clone of his body after he figures out a way back from the afterlife. With the Phoenix of Phoenix protocol, of course referring to how the fictional flamed Phoenix bird explodes in fire only to be reborn again. Rick sure does love him some cloning, man. Like, he literally is always doing it. But what I found particularly interesting is how, right after this, Morty informs Rick how his being desensitized to seeing Rick die over and over again has raised a major red flag with his counselors at school. A school that went as far as to call Homeland Security security after taking a look into Morty's psyche. And I honestly think that this is the show's purposeful way of showing us how our Morty definitely has a little bit of evil Morty inside of him, and that after enough adventures with Rick, there's still a potential for our Morty to snap and become as desensitized to killing as evil Morty does. However, it is due to the growth of character that we've seen manifest within Rick himself throughout this season, thanks in large part to Rick's therapist, Dr. Wong. This universe's version of Rick seems to be a lot kinder and loving to his family, and while he may get grumpy at times, he also has grown to apologize more and call himself out on his own BS. So our Morty becoming fed up with Rick and becoming evil seems unlikely. Besides, two evil Mortys would just be boring, and then they would have to share the eye patch, which is, how do you even coordinate that? And anyways, in order to send himself to Valhalla, Rick needs to die in glorious battle against a mighty enemy. So my man just whips out a Pokeball from Pokemon out of his asshole, because if you had an interdimensional portal gun, you would probably have a Pokeball too. So I respect it. Our editor Matt noticed that Rick's Pokeball looked a lot like the Park Ball that you used in Gen 4 Pokemon games in Pal Park. And you know what, Matthew? I'm gonna have to agree. But I also think that Rick's Pokeball also sort of looks like the Friend and Nest Pokeballs as well. But the Park Ball is right on the money. But unlike in the Pokemon universe, instead of a red light, Rick's Pokeball shoots out a lime green light when summoning his pocket monster with the big ass toes. But anyways, when Rick enters his personal death chamber, we can see that he's covered his walls with bloody Nordic runes for the ritual. Then he of course summons Bigfoot and is immediately turned into a puddle of blood, something that was actually teased all the way back in episode 3 of this season. In Air Force Wong, the president introduces Rick to an alien called Fleaflack, an alien that the president says might be able to tell the future. Fleaflack then draws a picture of Bigfoot murdering Rick while warning Rick of danger, a threat that Rick ignores in the episode. However, given what we learn about Rick going out of his way to capture Bigfoot just to torture him, there is a chance that Rick might have done this in an attempt to escape this Fleaflack prophecy on his own terms with science. Because if fate dictates that Rick might have to die by Bigfoot's big hands and feet, then Rick is fully within his right to prepare the exact conditions for that prophecy to happen. Just feels like something Rick would do. But anyways, after Rick dies, he arrives at Valhalla and is quickly sent off to go get his armor so that he can live, die, and repeat with his new Valhalla buddies, just like Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt do in Edge of Tomorrow. This entire episode has major Edge of Tomorrow vibes with all the fighting and dying and resurrecting, though there is a noticeable lack of Groundhog Day time travel. When Rick arrives at the blacksmith, we can see a hammer modeled after Thor's hammer from Norse mythology in the visual style of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Then after Morty accidentally dies after letting Bigfoot loose, the people of Valhalla confront Rick the Witch, who quickly refers to himself as Odin in order to fool the Valhallans to leave him alone. He also calls himself Spider-Man's uncle, seemingly mixing up Odin and Uncle Ben's characters in the Marvel comics, which is odd and hilarious. Rick also references the TV show Undercover Boss when pretending to be Odin as well. Back in Norway, parts of Rick's cybernetic body actually go flying as Bigfoot uses Rick's corpse to try to get at Rick's clone, prompting Rick's AI to activate the cybernetic implants within the clone in order to animate the clone just enough to evade Bigfoot. Clone Rick then climbs a Norwegian flagpole before Bigfoot is then apprehended by Norway's police and brought to the Vatican by the Pope's secret agents. Bigfoot is then introduced to the Pope, who appears loosely modeled after the current Pope Francis. When the Pope reveals to Bigfoot that he has clone Rick in chains, we can see that the Vatican placed a golden fig leaf on Rick's penis, much like many Roman sculptors used to do when covering up the genitals of their art. The use of the fig leaf in particular is due to the story of Adam and Eve in the Bible, when the two decided to cover themselves in fig leaves when they experienced the shame of nakedness for the first time. But anyways, Morty then wipes out wave after wave of Nordic warriors using a minigun, mines, and some automated drones, and editor Matt actually spotted that Morty actually uses a Valhalla version of the Gjallarhorn from Destiny 2, which is fun considering that the Gjallarhorn also has ties to the Norse and Nordic religion, as Heimdall himself was prophesied to use a horned Gjallarhorn instrument to mark the start of Ragnarok. I also love the added detail of all the people who die in Valhalla coming back to life in a glow of yellow light, much like Jane Foster does when she arrives in Valhalla in Thor 4. But anyways, Rick finally manages to find a way back home, but before he does, he creates 2 winged battlesuits for him and Morty in the style of Vulture's wingsuit from Spider-Man Homecoming, and flies around in that suit with his personal Mjolnir while calling Morty Spider-Man. And later, after Bigfoot carries out a series of ridiculous assassinations for a petty and hateful Pope, the Pope awards Bigfoot with a wrist translating device that the Pope says that he bought from a predator from the Predator movies for the price of 3 muskets. This is of course the second time we get a Predator reference this season, as Mr. Poopy Butthole's ex-wife is dating the Predator who fights Rick and his friends earlier on in the season. But after Bigfoot finally gets to attack the real Rick, Rick upgrades that translator to give him a deep voice akin to famous movie trailer voiceover artist Don LaFontaine. Rest in peace, what a king. When testing out his new voice, Bigfoot starts pretending to narrate a trailer for 2011's In Time, starring Justin Timberlake and Amanda Seyfried. But anyways, Rick, Morty, and Bigfoot then work together to confront the Pope, channeling the power of belief to become an all-powerful being, much like how the Universal Church of Truth does with their faith generators in Guardians of the Galaxy #1 from 2008, one of my favorite comics. But during one of the many times the gang get annihilated by the Pope shoots out a beam of energy with his 2 palms connecting like he was some type of Goku from Dragon Ball Z right before Rick whips out a shield but disintegrates anyway, which felt a lot like exactly what happened to Doctor Strange one of the many times that he faced Dormammu while repeatedly resurrecting himself with the Time Stone. Then when Bigfoot gets a new manlier body, Rick tells Bigfoot to dial his caveman talk back so he doesn't sound like a Muppet, which is a clear reference to Animal the Muppet from The Muppets. We then get a reference to the TV shows Ronin Warriors and Mobile Suit Gundam when Rick whips out his red supersuit that he used in Season 4 Episode 7's Polymortius, with Morty wearing an orange version of the Purge murder suit from Season 2 Episode 9's Look Who's Purging Now. But when that doesn't work, they somehow decide to graduate to duct taping pillows onto their bodies, which definitely sounds like a Morty or Jerry idea, if I'm honest. Then we get a reference to the 1987 film Monster Squad when Rick assembles a vampire, a swamp fish monster, a werewolf, a mummy, and a Frankenstein to fight the Pope. But after that fails, Rick decides to just cut the Pope off from his power source and catch that Italian monster within his Pokeball, with the show even making the Pokemon shaking animation that happens when you try to catch a Pokemon in the game. And finally, the post-credit scene features the return of the Poke Pope to do a Poke battle in an arena modeled after the Pikachu Charizard battle arena from the Detective Pikachu movie, with their opponent looking like a hybrid between Ash Ketchum from the Pokemon anime and the red Pokemon trainer from the Pokemon games. But anyways, that is it for this breakdown of episode 9 of season 7 of Rick and Morty. What did you guys think of this episode? Let us know in the comment section down below. And of course, I want to thank our editor Matt for helping me out with a number of Easter eggs in this episode. Matt is one of the biggest Rick and Morty fans on the world, so it's always great to have him helping out in these videos. But anyways, you can follow me at Messertainment on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or wherever I am on the internet. And hey, you could even catch me on the Guardians of the Galaxy podcast on YouTube. Just search for Guardians of the Galaxy. But most importantly, do not forget to subscribe to Heavy Spoilers here on YouTube, because my boy Paul has the best breakdowns in the business, my guys, and you do not want to miss out. But again, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are amazing, and I love that you guys spend time with me. It really means a lot to me. Love you guys so much, and I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.